This is the story of Clara Reed, the quiet, penniless fiancée nobody wanted. She was invited into one of the richest, most powerful families in New York, the DeWitts of Greystone Manor, only to be humiliated. They called her worthless. They called her a gold digger. They told her she would never, ever be mistress of their house. They were right. She wasn't the mistress. She was the new owner. And the eviction notice she served them was just the beginning of their nightmare. The DeWitt Summer Solstice Gala was not a party. It was a declaration of war, and Clara Reed was the primary casualty. Greystone Manor, the DeWitts' ancestral seat in the most exclusive pocket of the Hamptons, was a monument to old money. Its limestone facade, imported stone by stone from a French chateau, glowed in the June twilight. Manicured lawns looking more like green velvet than actual grass rolled down to the Atlantic. Tonight, hundreds of guests mingled, the men in linen suits, the women in vibrant, flowing silk. The air smelled of salt hydrangeas and, most of all, wealth. Clara stood near a towering marble urn, holding a flute of champagne she hadn't touched. She felt like a typo on an otherwise perfect page. Her fiancé, Nathaniel Nate DeWitt, was currently trapped by his father, Arthur, near the string quartet. Nate, with his kind eyes and earnest passion for sustainable architecture, a trade his mother called it, was the only reason she was here. He was the only person in this entire ecosystem who had ever seen her. Clara herself was deceptively simple. She wore a sleeveless, high-necked dress in a muted beige cashmere. To the untrained eye, it was plain. To the women here dripping in visible logos and ostentatious jewels, it was an offense. They didn't recognize it as a bespoke Loro Piana piece, a garment whose quiet luxury cost more than the diamond tennis bracelets on their wrists. They just saw beige. Nate, darling. The voice cut through the party's polite murmur like a shard of ice. Beatrice DeWitt. Nate's mother glided toward them. She was a tall, rail-thin woman whose face had been pulled so tight it looked like polished marble. She was beautiful, terrifying, and the absolute monarch of this domain. She kissed the air near Nate's cheek, her eyes never leaving Clara. You're letting your guest stand all alone. Clara isn't a guest, Mother. She's my fiancée. We're getting married here, remember? Nate's voice was tight. He hated this as much as she did. Beatrice gave a tinkling, brittle laugh. Of course. How silly of me. She turned her full attention to Clara. Her gaze was an appraisal, the kind one gives to livestock. That's a sweet dress, dear. Did you find it in the village? Before Clara could answer, another woman joined them. Penelope Hayes. Her family, the Hayes banking dynasty, was so wealthy they made the DeWitts look like middle management. Penelope was the woman Beatrice had intended for Nate. She was all teeth-tanned skin and platinum blonde hair. Oh, Beatrice, be nice, Penelope cooed, looping her arm through Beatrice's. She's trying. It's just... Well, some people just don't have the background for this sort of thing. It's not your fault, Clara. We were just discussing the wedding photos, Beatrice continued, as if Clara hadn't been insulted. We simply must have them on the main staircase. The Italian marble is just divine. Of course. She paused, tapping a manicured nail on her chin. We'll have to be careful with the lighting. It can be so unflattering on cheaper fabrics. We wouldn't want you to look washed out. The double meaning hung in the air, thick and toxic. You are cheap. You are pale. You do not belong. Nate stepped forward. Mother, Penelope, that's enough. Nonsense, darling, Penelope said, patting his arm. We're just girls talking. Clara understands, don't you? Clara looked at the two women. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel hurt. What she felt was a cold, quiet clarity. She was a mathematician looking at an equation that didn't balance. These people who defined themselves by their possessions had no idea what real value was. They saw her as worthless a liability. They had just made a catastrophic error in judgment. Clara gave a small, polite smile. You're right, Beatrice. The lighting on that staircase is crucial. I'll be sure to remember that. Beatrice and Penelope shared a look of smug victory. The little mouse had been put in her place. If you'll excuse me, Clara said, her voice impossibly calm. I need to make a quick call. She walked away from the glittering crowd past the servants in black and white and into the manor's dark oak-panelled library. The house was silent, the sound of the party a distant hum. She pulled out her simple, secure satellite phone, not the public iPhone she used with Nate. She dialed a single number. It was answered on the first ring. Mr. Harrison. Ms. Reed, I trust the party is tolerable. The voice on the other end was deep, precise, and belonged to Damien Harrison, the public-facing CEO of her actual life. It's been very informative, Clara said, gazing at a portrait of Nate's great-grandfather. Damien, I'm accelerating the timeline. I want a full, deep-dive analysis of DeWitt Industries and all associated family holdings. We already have the preliminary file, Damien said. It's not good. They're leveraged to the hilt. The entire estate, this house, it's all collateral on a series of very high-risk bridge loans. A cold smile touched Clara's lips. I thought as much. All this noise, she gestured to the party outside, is to cover the silence in their bank accounts. They're not just snobs, Damien. They're desperate. What's the play, Ms. Reed? Clara watched as across the lawn Beatrice DeWitt wrapped an arm around Penelope Hayes, laughing as they both looked in her direction. They thought they were predators. They didn't realize they were already prey. Begin a strategic acquisition of their debt, Clara ordered, her voice dropping to a whisper. Find out who holds the paper. Buy it. I want to own every single dollar they owe. Quietly. I don't want them to know who their new creditor is until I'm ready. And the house, Ms. Reed Greystone Manor. Clara looked at the portrait, at the arrogant, entitled face staring back at her. Especially the house, she said. Start with the house. She hung up, took a deep breath, and smoothed the cheap fabric of her dress. She composed her face back into one of polite, unassuming sweetness. She walked out of the library, back to the party. The invisible girl, the worthless bride. The clock had just started ticking on the DeWitt dynasty, and they hadn't even heard it. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare, executed with the silent precision of a sniper. To the DeWitts, life continued as normal, only with more pronounced disdain for Clara. Beatrice insisted on overseeing every wedding detail, which was in practice a daily ritual of dismantling Clara's preferences. Peonies. Oh no, Clara, she'd say at a meeting with a florist who charged $50,000 per event. That's so common. We're a rose family. Specifically the majestic hybrid. They're $200 a stem. Do try to keep up. Clara would just nod. Whatever you think is best, Beatrice. Nate, meanwhile, was caught in a painful vice. He loved Clara, but he was also the product of this family. He was trying to get his fledgling architecture firm off the ground a firm dedicated to eco-friendly affordable housing. It was a noble pursuit his family found baffling. "Why are you wasting time with plywood and solar panels, Nate?" his father Arthur had grumbled over dinner. "There's no money in helping the poor. The money is in telling the rich what to buy. Look at your mother. She's a brand." This pressure made Nate distracted and tense. He'd find Clara on her laptop and sigh. More work, Clara. That freelance design project must be intense. Clara, who was actually reviewing a hostile takeover bid for a lithium mining operation in Bolivia, would snap the laptop shut. "Just finishing up. I'm all yours." She hated the deception, but it was a necessary armor. Her real identity was a secret known to exactly 3 people. She was not Clara Reed, freelance graphic designer. She was AR, the sole anonymous chairwoman of Aura Holdings, a private equity Goliath, so massive and secretive it made the Hayes' family bank look like a regional credit union. She'd inherited the seed of it from a reclusive, brilliant father she barely knew, and in 10 years she had quietly, ruthlessly grown it into an empire that specialized in silent acquisitions, buying distressed assets, restructuring them, and absorbing them. Aura's specialty was identifying weakness beneath a veneer of strength, and the DeWitts were the weakest prey she had ever encountered. While Clara nodded politely about flower arrangements, Damian Harrison was moving mountains. He was a tall, impeccably dressed man who had been her father's protégé and was now her loyal right hand. His office in a nondescript steel and glass building in downtown Manhattan was the real seat of power. "You were right, Ms. Reed," Damian said during one of their encrypted video calls. Clara was parked in her modest leased car, supposedly buying groceries. "They're not just leveraged," Damian continued, his face grim. "They're drowning." Arthur DeWitt made a catastrophic bet against the tech market last quarter. He thought he was smarter than the algorithm. He wasn't. "The loans for the house?" Clara asked. "Worse than we thought. They didn't go to a prime lender. They took a structured note from a private bank in Geneva, Valois and C. Highly aggressive default interest rates that are borderline predatory. They missed their first payment 2 days ago." "Valois and C, I know them," Clara murmured. "They're vultures." "Yes," Damian said. "And as of 5 minutes ago, we are Valois and C. Or rather, an offshore subsidiary of an Aura-controlled fund has just acquired their entire distressed debt portfolio. The DeWitt loan was the crown jewel." Clara felt a cold thrill. "So we own the paper. We own the house. We own their businesses. We own them. They just don't know it yet. The notice of default will be sent by the original bank's letterhead, but the money is owed to us. What are your instructions?" Clara thought about Beatrice's sneer. "We're a Rose family." "Send the notice," Clara said. "Standard procedure. No aggression. Just the facts. I want them to feel the chill first. Then I want you to look into the Hayes Bank. Penelope is part of this. I want to know their exposure. I want to know their weaknesses." "Understood. And Ms. Reed." "Yes, Damian. Do be careful. These people are animals, and cornered animals bite." Clara disconnected the call just as Nate tapped on her car window. She jumped, startled. "Hey," he said, smiling, holding up a bouquet of peonies. "I know my mother is a nightmare. I saw these at the farmer's market and thought of you." Clara's throat tightened. This was the man she loved. This was the one good, real thing in her life. The guilt was a physical ache. "Nate, they're beautiful. Thank you." As he leaned in to kiss her, her mind was a split screen. On one side, this perfect simple moment. On the other, the cold digital confirmation that the first notice of default was now speeding toward Greystone Manor, a paper torpedo aimed straight at the heart of the DeWitt legacy. The first crack in the facade appeared 4 days later. Clara was in the kitchen, a room the family never entered, making herself a cup of tea. She heard a crash from the study. A heavy thud, followed by Arthur DeWitt's voice, raised in a way she'd never heard before. "What do you mean, non-negotiable? It's a simple extension. We're the DeWitts." Clara froze, listening. Beatrice's voice, sharp with fear. "Arthur, lower your voice. The staff, will hear you. What is it? It's the note. The Swiss bank. Valois. They're refusing to extend the payment. They're talking about the default clause." "What default clause?" "The one that, if we miss a payment, they can call the entire loan. Due in 30 days. All of it, Beatrice. $80 million. There was a long, terrible silence. Then the sound of a glass being swept off a desk. $80 million! Beatrice shrieked. "You told me it was 20. You lied to me. It was a bridge to cover the market losses I was going to. You were going to what ruin us, this house. Arthur, this house is everything. This is my family's legacy. It was the only collateral they'd take. Then you will call them back," Beatrice commanded, her voice regaining its steel. "You will tell them who we are. And you will call Robert Hayes. Tell him we need a bailout. He'll do it. He wants Penelope to marry Nate. This is how we get rid of that worthless little mouse in the guest room. We make Nate see that he has to save his family." Clara slowly backed out of the kitchen, her heart hammering. They weren't just going to let the ship sink. They were going to sacrifice their son and her to stay afloat. They had no idea that the bank they were trying to appease and the woman they were trying to destroy were one and the same. The scent of panic became a visible fog that settled over Greystone Manor. The servants, a reliable barometer of household pressure, began to whisper. Mr. Henderson, the butler, who had been with the family for 40 years, suddenly looked ill. His usual stiff posture now slumped. Beatrice, however, went on the offensive. She doubled down on her cruelty, as if by insulting Clara she could somehow reverse her financial fate. The wedding, once a distant event, was now her primary weapon. "Nate, we must have a meeting about the cost of this," Beatrice announced one evening, cornering him and Clara in the conservatory. "Mother, we've been over this. Clara and I are happy with a small—" "Don't be ridiculous," Beatrice snapped. "A DeWitt wedding is a state event. It is not small, and frankly," she aimed her gaze at Clara, "given your lack of contribution, we must be realistic." She was trying to bait Clara to make her feel so small she would run. But what Beatrice didn't know was that while she was posturing, Clara's team was executing a pincer movement. Phase 1. The Hayes refusal. Arthur DeWitt, as instructed by his wife, made the most humiliating call of his life. He called Robert Hayes Penelope's father and the head of Hayes Mutual Bank. "Robert, my boy," Arthur blustered, trying to sound casual. "Bit of a cash flow hiccup. DeWitt Industries is just restructuring, you understand. I need you to extend me a line of credit. Say $90 million, just to tide us over." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Arthur," Robert Hayes finally said, his voice cold. "I'm afraid that's impossible." "Impossible? Don't be silly. We're old friends. Our children. My bank's priorities are shifting, Arthur. We're moving into new markets, and frankly, your portfolio is toxic. We can't touch it. It's just business." Arthur was stunned. "But Penelope, and Nate, my daughter." Hayes said, his voice flat. is not a bargaining chip for a bad loan. I'm sorry, Arthur. My hands are tied. Arthur hung up the phone, his face ashen. Hayes Mutual was their last best hope. What Arthur couldn't possibly know was that 2 days earlier, Damian Harrison had met with Robert Hayes. The meeting wasn't about the DeWitts. It was about Aura Holdings offering to buy a 15% stake in Hayes Mutual's struggling Asian-Pacific division, an infusion of $3 billion in cash that would solve all of Hayes's overnight liquidity problems. The deal was contingent on Aura being their exclusive private equity partner. It also came with an unspoken but crystal-clear condition. The DeWitt family was to be cut loose. Robert Hayes, a banker above all, chose the $3 billion Phase 2. The public humiliation. While Arthur was reeling from the Hayes betrayal, Beatrice received a call from the chairwoman of the Met Gala. "Beatrice, darling," the voice purred, "we're just finalizing the tables for this year. And I'm so sorry, but our new corporate sponsor has requested final approval on the guest list. And it seems your name has been moved to the wait list." Beatrice nearly dropped the phone. "The wait list? I've been on the committee for 20 years. Who is this new sponsor?" "Oh, a dreadfully private group. Aura Holdings. I'm sure you've never heard of them. They're terribly low profile but unfathomably wealthy. And they've been very specific. My hands are tied, darling. Truly." Beatrice was now cut off from her 2 primary sources of power, her credit and her social standing. The pressure inside the house became unbearable. The DeWitts began to fight openly and viciously. "This is your fault," Beatrice shrieked at Arthur in the middle of the foyer. "Your idiotic investments. You've ruined us, decades of legacy gone." "My fault," he roared back. "Who insisted on the new wing, the essential re-landscaping? The $500,000 for that ridiculous gala last month. You've been spending money we haven't had for 10 years. In the midst of this, Nate found Clara. He looked exhausted, his eyes haunted. "Clara, my family is falling apart," he confessed, his voice breaking. "My father, he's locked in his study. My mother is. I've never seen her like this. It's all about money. This house, I think we're going to lose it." Clara took his hands. They were cold. "Nate, it's just a house." "It's not to them," he said, anguish in his voice. "It's their whole identity. And now my mother is blaming you." As if on cue, Beatrice stormed into the room, her face a mask of rage. She had just gotten off the phone with her lawyer, who had informed her that Valois and Sierre was not only refusing to negotiate, but had sold their debt to an unidentified private holding company that was completely unreachable. She pointed a trembling finger at Clara. "You," she hissed. "This is your fault." Nate stood up. "Mother, don't. This has nothing to do with Clara." "It has everything to do with her," Beatrice cried, her voice cracking with hysteria. "She's a curse, a common, worthless jinx. Since the day you brought her into this house, everything has unraveled. With her simple, mousy ways, she's brought her poverty into our lives like a disease. That is enough," Nate roared, his face red. He had never, ever raised his voice to his mother. "That is the woman I'm going to marry. You'll marry her over my dead body," Beatrice screamed. "She is nothing. She has nothing. Penelope would have saved us. This little urchin. She's just here to watch us burn." Clara, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the hysteria like a razor. "Beatrice, you're wrong." Beatrice scoffed. "Oh, am I? What are you going to tell me you have a secret trust fund?" "No," Clara said, looking her dead in the eye. "I'm just telling you. You're wrong about me. And you're blaming the wrong person." "Get out!" Beatrice whispered, her eyes wild. "Get out of my house!" "Mother!" Nate shouted. "No, Nate," Clara said, placing a hand on his chest. "It's okay." She turned back to Beatrice. "I'll leave, but I promise you're going to regret those words." "The only thing I regret," Beatrice sneered, "is that I didn't have you thrown out the day you arrived." Clara nodded slowly. "Understood." She walked past Nate, picked up her small handbag, and walked out the grand front door of Greystone Manor, leaving Nate standing between his shattered, furious mother and the woman he loved. Nate watched her go, his heart breaking. "Mother," he said, his voice hollow. "What have you done?" Beatrice, suddenly looking old and terrified, sank onto a Louis XIV chair. "I've saved us," she whispered, though she didn't believe it for a second. Clara got into her car and drove. She didn't go far. She pulled over on a bluff overlooking the ocean, the lights of Greystone Manor twinkling below her, like a dying star. She called Damien. "She called me worthless," Clara said, her voice shaking, but not with tears. It was with a cold, refined rage. "She said I was a disease. She threw me out." "Ms. Reed," Damien said, his voice gentle. "Give the word. I can have a sheriff's deputy there in an hour. The foreclosure notice is ready. We can seize the asset." "No," Clara said. "Not like that. That's messy. It gives them a story to tell, a way to be victims. I want this to be clean." She paused, thinking. Beatrice had tried to buy her son's happiness by selling her. She had tried to save her house by sacrificing Nate. The house was the root of it all. "They're trying to leverage Nate," Clara said. "They think Penelope is the answer. They still think they have an exit. I need to take away all their exits. Then I want to make them an offer. An offer after this. A bribe," Clara said. "But not from me to them, from them to me. I'm going to give Beatrice one last chance to do the right thing. And I'm going to make sure she fails." The next 2 days were the longest of Nate's life. He and his mother did not speak. He stayed in his room, calling Clara's phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. He had no idea that her public phone was currently sitting in the glove box of her car, while her real phone was facilitating the final crushing moves of her strategy. The DeWitt family was now completely and totally isolated. Their lawyers from the prestigious firm of Cravath, Swain and Moore had officially dropped them as clients, citing non-payment of a 6-month-old invoice. The Wall Street Journal had run a small but devastating piece on DeWitt Industries, questioning its solvency. The unidentified creditor had formally filed a notice of public foreclosure auction set to take place in 1 week on the steps of the county courthouse. Greystone Manor. The symbol of their power was going to be sold off to the highest bidder. Beatrice DeWitt was no longer a queen. She was a cornered animal. She had lost her social standing, her credit, and now her home. The only asset she had left was her son. And to keep him, she first had to get rid of Clara for good. She tracked Clara down. She'd hired a private investigator who found Clara staying at a modest by Hampton Standards hotel in the village. Beatrice didn't call. She simply arrived. Clara was in the hotel's small business center on her laptop. She looked up, And there was Beatrice DeWitt, dressed in a Chanel suit, looking utterly out of place against the beige floral wallpaper. "We need to talk," Beatrice said. It wasn't a request. Clara slowly closed her laptop. "I don't think we have anything to say to each other, Beatrice." "Don't be insolent," Beatrice snapped, sitting opposite her. "I'm here to finalize things. You've made your point. You're angry. Fine. Now let's talk about your severance package." Clara raised an eyebrow. "My severance package for leaving my son," Beatrice said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She reached into her Hermes Birkin bag and pulled out a checkbook. "I am prepared to offer you $500,000. In exchange, you will sign a non-disclosure agreement. You will leave New York, and you will never contact Nathaniel again." Clara looked at the checkbook. She looked at Beatrice's arrogant, desperate face. The internal mathematician in her head did a quick calculation. Aura Holdings had generated $500,000 in passive interest in the time it had taken Beatrice to walk across the room. Clara started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was dry and humorless. Beatrice's face tightened. "Do you find this funny?" "That is more money than you or your entire family have ever seen." "Oh, Beatrice," Clara said, leaning forward. "You really have no idea, do you? You have no idea what's happening. I know that you are a temporary problem I am now solving. Take the money, Clara. It's the only smart move you have left. Go buy yourself, I don't know, a nice little apartment somewhere in the Midwest." Clara leaned back. The moment she had been waiting for. The final damning piece of evidence. "Tell me, Beatrice," Clara said, her voice dropping to a conversational tone. "This $500,000, where is it from? I'm aware of the foreclosure. I'm aware your credit lines are frozen. The jewelry. The art. Did you sell your diamonds?" Beatrice's blood ran cold. How do you know about that?" "I know everything," Clara said. "I know about the Valois loan. I know about the failed bet against the tech market. I know Robert Hayes won't take your calls. I know you were waitlisted for the Met Gala. And I know that this check," she tapped the checkbook, "is from Nate's trust." Beatrice recoiled, as if struck. He offered. He wants to help his family." "He offered to help his family," Clara said, her voice now filled with ice. "Not to bribe his fiancée. You are stealing from your own son. You are using the last bit of money. He has the money he earned from his own architecture firm, the one you despise, to try and buy me off." "It's for his own good," Beatrice shrieked, her composure shattering. "To save him from you. To save him, or to save this house." Clara stood up, her small frame suddenly radiating an authority that dwarfed Beatrice. "You would sell your son. You would steal from him all for a pile of imported stones. You are the most worthless person I have ever met." You bitch," Beatrice spat. "You could offer me $500 million, Beatrice, and it wouldn't be enough. Your money is worthless, and so are you." Clara walked out of the business center, leaving Beatrice DeWitt alone, her checkbook open and useless in her hand. The Queen had been checkmated. Clara got to her car, her hands shaking. This was the part she hated. The emotional fallout. She called Damien. "It's done," Clara said, her voice low. "She did exactly as we predicted. She tried to bribe me with Nate's own money." "The team is ready, Ms. Reed." Damien's voice was grim. "The auction is in 4 days. Our proxies are in place. We'll be bidding against, well, no one. The toxic debt attached is too high. It will be a formality." "No," Clara said. "Change of plans. No auction. An auction is public. It's a spectacle. It gives them a story. I don't want them to have a story." "What do you propose? We are the sole creditor, correct? We own the debt free and clear." "Yes, we are the bank." "Then the bank is foreclosing," Clara said. "Not at an auction. Privately. Effective immediately. They have 24 hours to vacate. Send the notice. Send the legal notice. And Damien, send a team. A team, our security team, and our forensic accountants, the ones who handled the Argentinian restructuring. I don't want them to take so much as a silver spoon that doesn't belong to them. This isn't a negotiation. It's an eviction." "Understood." "And Nate," Clara's voice softened. "Find him. Have one of our discreet security guys pick him up. Tell him Clara needs him. Tell him to meet me at my hotel. He is not to go to that house. He doesn't deserve to see what's about to happen." "It will be done, Ms. Reed. By this time tomorrow, you will own Greystone Manor." Clara hung up and leaned her head against the steering wheel. She had just signed the death warrant for a family. She felt no joy, only a grim, weary sense of completion. The cancer had been located. Now it was time to cut it out. It was raining. Not a gentle summer shower, but a cold, driving, angry deluge that turned the perfect green lawns of Greystone Manor into a field of mud. At 9:00 a.m., 3 black, unmarked SUVs pulled up the long gravel driveway. They did not pause at the gate. They drove straight through it. Beatrice DeWitt, who hadn't slept, saw them from her bedroom window. She assumed it was the bank, or perhaps more lawyers coming to plead with them. She ran down the main staircase, the one she had forbidden Clara from using, and flung open the massive oak doors. "Who are you?" she demanded. "You are trespassing." Damien Harrison stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was in a dark, bespoke suit, holding a black umbrella. He looked as if he were attending a funeral. Behind him, 6 men, 2 in suits, 4 in severe, tactical-looking security uniforms emerged and fanned out. "Ma'am, you are trespassing," Damien said, his voice polite, but utterly final. He held up a leather-bound folder. "I am Damien Harrison, representing Aura Holdings, the sole creditor and new legal owner of this estate. This is a writ of seizure. You and Mr. DeWitt have 60 minutes to collect your personal effects and vacate the property." Beatrice stared at him, the rain plastering her hair to her face. "Aura Holdings, I don't understand. The auction, it's not for 4 days. The auction was a courtesy which has been rescinded," Damien said. "The debt was called. You have defaulted. The asset has been seized. Our forensic accounting team," he gestured to the men in suits, "is here to take inventory. Our security team," he gestured to the others, "is here to ensure a smooth transition." "You can't," Beatrice shrieked. "This is our home." "It was your home," Damien corrected. "It is now an asset of Aura Holdings." Arthur DeWitt stumbled out, pulling a robe on over his pajamas. "What is this? What's going on?" "These people, they're throwing us out," Beatrice cried. "Mr. DeWitt," Damien said, nodding to him. "The property at 1400 Ocean Bluff is now forfeit. Please cooperate." "Cooperate? I'll call the police. I'll call my lawyer," Arthur blustered. "Your lawyers are no longer your lawyers," Damien said, checking his watch. "And the police have already been notified of this transition. They are on standby should you refuse to comply. You have 58 minutes. The accountants, without a word, walked past the DeWitts and into the house. They began in the foyer, opening a laptop, their fingers flying, taking photos and tagging assets. "The French Impressionist over the fireplace," one said. "Monet. Scène at Bougival. Tag it. The 17th century tapestry. Tag it." Beatrice let out a sound of pure, primal despair. "No. No. No." She turned on Arthur. You did this. You weak, useless old man. You've ruined me. Me!" he shouted back, his face purple. "This is what you wanted. The parties. The jewels. The image." As they screamed at each other on the front steps in the pouring rain. A third car pulled up, a simple rented sedan. Clara Reed stepped out, holding a small umbrella. She had spent the morning with Nate. He had arrived at her hotel terrified after being picked up by a driver who said Clara was in trouble. She hadn't told him everything, just that his parents were in financial trouble and that she had to fix it. He was confused, but he was with her. He was safe. He was not here for this. Clara had come alone. Beatrice stopped shouting when she saw her. Her face, already twisted in rage, contorted into something new. Utter disbelief. "You," Beatrice whispered. You're with them, you worthless little—" She lunged at Clara, her hands clawed. "Do not touch her." Damien's voice was like a thunderclap. One of the security men stepped instantly between the two women, his hand raised. Beatrice stumbled back. She looked at Damien. She looked at the men tagging her possessions. She looked at the worthless girl standing calmly on the gravel. And in one blinding, agonizing flash, the equation balanced in her head. The anonymous, low-profile, new sponsor of the Met Gala. Aura Holdings, the unreachable creditor. Aura Holdings, the girl who had laughed at a $500,000 bribe, the girl who knew every detail of their finances, the girl who had been at the house listening, watching, analyzing, the girl named Clara Reed. A.R. Aura. Beatrice's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the wet stone steps. "Oh my God!" She breathed the rain mixing with the tears on her face. "It was you. It was you all along. You bought us." Clara walked up the steps, standing over her. She looked at the woman who had tormented her, the woman who had tried to steal from her own son. "You called me worthless, Beatrice." Clara said, her voice quiet, but it carried over the rain. "You said I was a disease. You told me I would never, ever be the mistress of this house." Clara looked up at the grand limestone facade. She looked at the main staircase, visible through the open door. "You were right about one thing," Clara said, turning her gaze back to the weeping woman at her feet. "I'm not the mistress." She pulled the house key, a new one, delivered by Damien that morning, from her pocket. "I'm the owner." She looked at Damien. "Mr. Harrison, please have security escort Mr. and Mrs. DeWitt off my property. They've had their 60 minutes. "Clara, please," Arthur begged, all the fight gone, just a broken old man in a bathrobe. "Nate. Where is Nate? Nate, help us." "Nate isn't here," Clara said, her voice hard. "I made sure he wouldn't have to see this. He's a good man, and he deserved a better family than you. You have 5 minutes to get in your car, or you will be arrested for trespassing." Beatrice just sobbed a horrible, racking sound. The security guards gently but firmly lifted her and Arthur by the elbows. They were led stumbling and broken to a single Mercedes, parked in the garage, the only car that was paid off, which Clara had generously allowed them to keep. Clara Reed stood on the porch, the umbrella at her side, the rain washing the mud from the steps. She watched as the car, driven by a hysterical Beatrice, spun its wheels in the mud and finally careered down the driveway, out of the gates and out of her life. Damien Harrison came to stand beside her. "Ms. Reed," he said, "the asset is secured. The house is yours." Clara looked out at the ocean. "It's not just a house, Damien," she said softly. "It's leverage." The house was silent. The storm had passed, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and salt. The accounting team worked quietly in the study, but the rest of the manor was empty, a cavernous, hollow space. Clara stood in the grand foyer, her footsteps echoing on the Italian marble. This was the staircase Beatrice said she was unfit to be photographed on. Now it was hers. The feeling was not triumph. It was, heavy. She heard a car, this one she was expecting. Nate DeWitt walked through the open front door. He stopped dead. The house was the same, but different. The air was still. The oppressive, heavy scent of Beatrice's perfume was gone. "Clara," he said, his voice hesitant. "What's going on?" "That man, Damien. He said you own this place. He said you foreclosed on my family." He looked at her, and his eyes weren't filled with the love she was used to. They were filled with confusion, fear, and a dawning, terrible sense of betrayal. "Clara, who are you?" This was the part she had dreaded. The asset was secured. Now she had to save the relationship. "My name is Clara Reed," she said, her voice shaking for the first time. "But the world, the financial world, knows me as AR, the head of Aura Holdings." She told him everything. Her reclusive, brilliant father, the massive, unexpected inheritance, the years spent building it into a silent global empire, the loneliness, the profound, aching desire to be loved for herself, not for her 9-figure bank account. "I used my mother's maiden name," she explained, tears welling in her eyes. "I lived in a simple apartment. I learned graphic design. I wanted a normal life. I wanted to find one person who didn't see me as a vault. And then I met you. You with your passion for sustainable houses and your kind eyes, and you saw me, Nate. You were the one real thing." Nate sank onto the bottom step of the staircase. He was pale. "So, all of it was a lie. Our first date, that little Italian place, was that you slumming it? Were you laughing at me?" "No," she cried, rushing to him. "That was the only real part I fell in love with you. I was going to tell you, after the wedding. I didn't know how. But my parents, my home, you destroyed them." He whispered the accusation hanging in the air. "They destroyed themselves," Clara said, her voice hardening. "Did you know they were going to lose this house whether I existed or not? They were drowning in debt. They were criminals, Nate. Don't say that. It's true." At that moment, Damien Harrison appeared from the study, holding a ledger. His face was granite. "Ms. Reed," he said, "Nate, you both need to see this." He opened the ledger. "We're auditing the books of DeWitt Industries. It's worse than we thought. They weren't just bad at business. They were committing fraud." What are you talking about?" Nate said, standing up. "Your father," Damien said, pointing to a line item, has been illegally transferring money from the employee pension fund to cover his market losses. For 3 years, he's stolen over $8 million from his own workers. Nate stared at the book, his face draining of all color. He wouldn't, Nate stammered. My father. He did, Damien said. The SEC will be very interested in this. They're facing prison, Nate. Significant prison time. Nate stumbled back, looking at Clara with horrified eyes. You knew this. I suspected, Clara said gently. The numbers didn't add up. The desperation, it was more than just debt. Nate, your parents. They are not who you think they are. Nate looked around the grand hall at the portraits of his ancestors at the glittering chandelier. It was all a lie. A beautiful, hollow, criminal lie. And your mother? Clara continued, her voice soft. She came to me 2 days ago. She offered me $500,000 to leave you. Nate's head snapped up. What? She tried to bribe me. And Nate, the money. She was going to take it from your trust. The money you earned yourself. She was stealing from you to get rid of me. Nate said nothing. He just walked to the window, looking out at the ruined gardens. He was seeing his entire life, his entire childhood, recontextualized as a fraud. His proud father was a thief. His elegant mother was a monster. He was quiet for a long time. Clara stood her heart in her throat, giving him space. She had played her hand. She had won the house, the company, the war. But she was about to lose the only thing she truly cared about. Finally, Nate turned around. His eyes were clear, and the confusion was gone. It was replaced by a deep, profound sadness. What happens now? He asked. That Clara said, is up to us. Us? I didn't do this to punish them, Nate, she said, walking toward him, her hands clasped in front of her. I did this to free you. You were trapped by their legacy, by their expectations, by their sins. They were going to drag you down with them. They were going to use you as a bargaining chip to marry Penelope Hayes. They were going to steal your own money. They were never going to let you be you. She stood in front of him. I love you. The man who wants to build small, beautiful, honest houses. The man who brought me peonies because his mother hated them. I love that man. And I bought this house. I bought all of this. To give you a choice. A choice. We can let the federal government handle this. Your parents will go to jail. For a long time. And they should. Or what? Or... We fix it, Clara said. Aura Holdings will quietly absorb the entirety of DeWitt Industries. We will use our own funds to make the employee pension fund whole. Every cent your father stole will be repaid. We won't press criminal charges. In exchange, they sign over everything. What's left of their name, their reputation, and they disappear. Nate looked at her, astounded. You would do that? After what they did to you, you would save them. I'm not saving them, Clara said, finally taking his hand. I'm saving you. I don't want this to be your story. I don't want son of a federal prisoner to be your legacy, your parents. They'll be left with a small stipend, enough to live on, a small condo somewhere. They will have no power. They will have no name. They will just be two old people. A quiet, humiliating exile. But not prison. Nate processed this. The sheer power of her. The ruthlessness. But also the mercy. He looked at her. Really looked at her. The quiet girl was gone. In her place was this queen, this brilliant, terrifying, and surprisingly compassionate woman. You're incredible, he breathed. You're the most terrifying and incredible person I have ever met. Is that a bad thing? She whispered. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. No, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It's not. I need a minute. I love you, Clara, but I think I need to properly meet A.R. Clara held him, the tension of a month of a lifetime draining out of her. She's not so bad, Clara whispered. She's just very, very good at protecting what's hers. He held her tighter. The house was theirs. The future was theirs. The DeWitt Empire was dead. The Reed DeWitt Empire had just been born. The transition was as swift as it was silent. To the outside world, it appeared that the over-leveraged DeWitt Industries had been saved in a last-minute acquisition by the enigmatic Aura Holdings. The Wall Street Journal praised the move as a shrewd absorption of legacy assets. There was no mention of foreclosure, no word of fraud. Damian Harrison handled the negotiations with Arthur and Beatrice. It was not a negotiation. He met them at a sterile lawyer's office in the city. They looked small and grey. They signed. They signed away their company. They signed away their name. They signed a non-disclosure agreement, so ironclad that if they even whispered the name Clara Reed, they would be destitute. In return, Aura Holdings wired $8.2 million into the DeWitt Industries pension fund and set up a small anonymous trust that would pay for a rented 2-bedroom condo in a gated community in Boca Raton, Florida, the ultimate punchline for New York old money snobbery. Penelope Hayes, upon hearing the DeWitts were broke, and Clara Reed was in fact one of the richest women in the world, attempted a desperate pivot. She sent Clara a fawning, cringing email apologizing for her playful teasing and suggesting they partner on a charity. Clara forwarded the email to Damian. Damian had Aura's legal team send back a one-sentence cease and desist letter. Penelope was never heard from again. Greystone Manor was renovated. Clara didn't gut it. She healed it. She let in the light. The heavy dark draperies were replaced with light linen. The oppressive dark portraits of DeWitt ancestors were put in storage, replaced with a stunning collection of modern female-led art. Nate, for his part, went through a period of mourning, not for his parents, but for the childhood he thought he'd had. He and Clara talked. For weeks they just talked. He learned about her, the real her. She learned about him, the man freed from his legacy. He didn't want to be a part of Aura. He didn't have the head for that kind of cutthroat finance. Good, Clara told him. I have the killer instinct. I need a moral compass. I need a partner. So they formed a new division, the Aura DeWitt Foundation. With a $5 billion endowment, its sole mission was to fund and build the kind of revolutionary, sustainable architecture Nate had always dreamed of. He wasn't just building houses, he was building new cities. He was no longer a trade. He was a visionary. They didn't have a grand wedding at the manor. They eloped. One afternoon in October, with only Damian Harrison and his wife as witnesses, they were married in the back garden of Greystone Manor, overlooking the ocean. Clara wore a simple white dress. Nate wore a blue suit. They wrote their own vows. It was real. 6 months later, the doors of Greystone Manor opened for their first gala. It wasn't a party. It was the launch of their foundation. But their true debut as a couple was 2 weeks later at the Met Gala. Clara Reed, once mocked for her cheap dress, now stood at the top of the steps, not as a guest, but as the chairwoman of the event. She wore a custom Schiaparelli gown, a sculptural masterpiece of black and gold. It wasn't loud. It was art. It was power. At her side, Nate was not in her shadow. He was her equal, looking sharp and confident in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. A journalist from Vogue, recognizing them as the new power couple, rushed over. "Ms. Reed, Mr. DeWitt." "What a story," the journalist gushed. "Ms. Reed, there are rumors that your acquisition of DeWitt Industries and Greystone Manor was, well, personal. That you bought it out of spite." Clara looked at the journalist. She looked at the cameras. She looked at Nate, who squeezed her hand. She smiled a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Spite is a terrible investment," Clara said, her voice clear and strong. "I don't buy things I don't value." She turned and looked at her husband, the love for him open and visible for the whole world to see. "I bought it," she said, "because it was home." And that's how the worthless bride showed them all the true meaning of value. The story of Clara and Nate isn't just about revenge. It's about building a new legacy, one based on truth, not tradition. The DeWitts defined themselves by a house built on lies. Clara and Nate rebuilt it into a home founded on partnership and purpose. What did you think of Clara's final move? Was her mercy on Beatrice and Arthur the right call, or would you have preferred to see them face justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories where the underdog comes out on top and the arrogant get what they deserve, please like this video and share it with someone who needs a good story. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a single minute of the drama. He stood on a stage of black marble, bathed in a spotlight, holding a glass of Bollinger champagne. This was Dante Russo's coronation. He had won the divorce, he had won the $100 million, and he had won the narrative. He smirked at the Vogue editors in the front row, a picture of triumph. He raised his glass to toast his new fashion empire, built on the ashes of his cold, controlling marriage. Then the giant screens behind him flickered. The music died, and the face of his ex-mother-in-law billionaire CEO Madeline Hayes appeared. She wasn't there to congratulate him. She was there to execute him. The world first came to know Dante Russo through the lens of a paparazzi camera on a beach in St. Bart's. He was all sharp angles and sun-kissed olive skin, his arm draped possessively around Serafina Hayes. The headlines were brutal billionaire wallflower snares, Italian stallion. Serafina Hayes was the antithesis of her name. In a family of fire-breathing corporate titans, she was quiet earth. She was the sole heir to the Aura Tech global fortune, a $50 billion empire built by her mother, Madeline. But while Madeline dominated Bloomberg terminals, Serafina haunted museums and funded archaeological digs. She was kind, brilliant, and in the eyes of the society pages, hopelessly plain. Dante was not. Dante was a masterpiece of Milanese genetics, a struggling model who understood his true currency was not on a runway, but in the private salons of the ultra-rich. He met Serafina at a fundraiser she was hosting for the preservation of Venetian art. He hadn't known a single thing about the art, but he spoke passionately about the soul of the canals, his dark eyes fixed on hers. She was charmed. He was efficient. Their marriage, 6 months later, was the event of the season, a $10 million affair at the family's Newport estate. Madeline Hayes watched the proceedings from the front row, her face an unreadable mask of polite neutrality. She had run a full background check on Dante, of course. It was clean, almost suspiciously so. No criminal record, no debts, just a string of wealthy older patrons. He was, in her professional opinion, a high-functioning parasite. But Serafina, for the first time in her life, had been defiant. She was in love. Let her be in love, Madeline, her own lawyer, Arthur Kincaid, had advised. Just make sure the prenup is ironclad. The prenup was a fortress. Dante Russo signed it with a flourish, his smile never wavering. He knew a fortress could be sieged. Life as Mr. Serafina Hayes was for a time perfect. Dante became a lifestyle influencer. His Instagram, once a sparse collection of headshots, exploded. He was Dante Russo, reclining on a yacht off the Amalfi Coast. Dante Russo front row at Paris Fashion Week. Dante Russo curating a dinner party in their $40 million Fifth Avenue penthouse. He didn't just wear the clothes Serafina's money bought. He personified a life that millions envied. He was charismatic, charming, and utterly devoted in public. She is my muse, he'd tell Vanity Fair, my anchor in a world of shallow beauty. Behind the scenes, the performance was exhausting. Sarah darling, he'd say, scrolling through his feed, this botany thing you're funding, it's not sexy. No one cares about Amazonian fungi. Serafina would look up from her research, her brow furrowed. It's not supposed to be sexy, Dante. It's a key compound for a new anti-malarial drug. But the optics, my love, he'd sigh as if explaining a complex theory. We need to be at the Met Gala, not digging in the mud. We need to be a brand. Serafina was a brand. The Serafina Foundation was one of the most respected philanthropic organizations in the world. It built schools, funded medical research, and operated with quiet, ruthless efficiency, a trait she had inherited from her mother. Dante, meanwhile, felt the gilded cage tightening. He was an accessory, a beautiful, expensive, and ultimately powerless Fabergé egg. The prenup was absolute. In the event of a divorce, he would receive a one-time payment of $1 million for every year of marriage, capped at 5 years. A pittance. He was determined to change the terms of the deal one way or another. He began his campaign subtly. He started to advise Serafina on her foundation's investments. This PR firm you use is ancient, he said one evening, swirling a $1,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux. They don't understand social capital. You need someone aggressive, someone who can place you. He introduced her to Bianca Wells. Bianca was a shark in Chanel, a PR maestro who specialized in reputational management. She was all teeth and compliments. Serafina disliked her instantly, but Dante was insistent. Just a consultation, my love. For me. Serafina, ever the peacemaker, agreed. This was the first and most critical mistake. Bianca Wells didn't work for Serafina. She worked for Dante. And through her, Dante began to meet people. Not just influencers, but bankers. Private equity types. Men who understood that lifestyle was just another asset class. He began to build a world separate from his wife. He started having business lunches that lasted until cocktail hour. He spoke of synergy and vertical integration. He was building a case. And Serafina, busy funding a new water treatment facility in Peru, was too preoccupied to see the scaffolding being erected for her own downfall. The true fracture came at a tense family dinner. It was just the three of them, Dante, Serafina, and Madeline, in the Hayes' starkly modern dining room overlooking Central Park. Dante cleared his throat. "Madeline, Sarah, I've been working on a project, a new venture." He slid a glossy leather-bound proposal across the table. On the cover, a single stylized R. "Rus Esso," he announced. "A lifestyle brand, fashion, hospitality. A new members-only club in Soho. It's time to leverage the Hayes Russo name." Serafina stared at the proposal. "Dante, this looks like it cost $50,000 to print." "You have to spend money to make money, darling." He smiled. "I'm projecting a $200 million valuation in 3 years. I just need the seed capital. $50 million. There was a long silence, broken only by the chime of the grandfather clock. Madeline Hayes placed her fork down. She hadn't even opened the binder. "No," she said. Dante's smile twitched. "I'm sorry." "No. Auratech Global does not invest in vanity projects. And the Hayes name," she said, her voice dropping a degree, "is not a brand to be leveraged by a club. It's a global leader in biometric security and quantum computing." "This isn't your decision, Madeline." Dante snapped his mask, slipping. "This is my life. Our life." He turned to his wife. "Sarah, tell her." Serafina looked at the R logo. She thought of the $50 million she was trying to raise for her Peruvian project. "Dante," she said softly. "I can't. The foundation needs that. People's lives depend on that." Dante stared at her. The two women, mother and daughter, are united front of cold, hard no. He saw it then. He would always be the outsider, the court jester. He threw his napkin on the table. "You," he pointed at Madeline. "You've been poisoning her against me from day one." He turned to Serafina, his voice dropping into a tone of deep theatrical hurt. "And you're just a coward. You'd rather stay a boring little librarian under her thumb than be a queen with me." He stormed out. That night he didn't come home. The next morning, Page 6 had an exclusive. "Dante Russo moves out of penthouse. I need to breathe," says model husband. The war had begun. The divorce was not a legal proceeding. It was a PR war, and Dante Russo had hired the best general. Bianca Wells mobilized her network with terrifying speed. The narrative she crafted was a masterpiece of victimhood. Dante wasn't a gold digger. He was a creative soul suffocated by old money. Serafina wasn't a philanthropist. She was a cold, passionless woman, manipulated by her tyrannical mother. Madeline Hayes wasn't a CEO. She was a dragon guarding a treasure she didn't deserve. "Dante is devastated," Bianca told People magazine in an exclusive interview. "He tried for 2 years to build a real life with Serafina, to bring joy and passion to that mausoleum of a family. But they don't just want your love. They want your soul." The leaks were constant and strategic. Paparazzi whom Bianca had on retainer caught Dante looking forlorn outside a rented Soho loft, carrying a single artfully distressed leather duffel bag. He was photographed seeking solace with other models, beautiful, sympathetic women who would pat his arm as he bravely told his story over Negronis at Carbone. Dante himself gave a masterful performance. He was booked on The Dialogue, The podcast de rigueur for celebrities wanting to launder their reputations. It was suffocating. Dante said, his voice a perfect husky blend of sadness and strength. You know, people see the money, the houses. They don't see the isolation. I proposed a business, a way for us to build something together, something of our own. And they treated me like the help. The podcast host, a woman known for her pseudo-intellectual takedowns, was putty in his hands. So you were creatively suppressed. Dante laughed, a hollow, tragic sound. I was erased. I was a walking, talking handbag. I finally had to make a choice. Do I die there a beautiful decoration? Or do I leave with nothing but my integrity and try to build something real? Nothing but his integrity became the rallying cry. A #FreeDante hashtag trended for a full 48 hours. He was the modern man, a creative force being crushed by an archaic matriarchy. While Dante played the public martyr, his legal team, also guided by Bianca, launched a brutal private assault. They contested the pre-NUP. The document is unconscionable, his lawyer argued in a closed-door mediation. Mr. Russo was coerced. He was young in love and manipulated by a family with legal resources 1,000 times his own. Madeline's lawyer, Arthur Kincaid, a stoic man who had been with the family for 40 years, was unfazed. Your client signed it counselor. He was advised by his own counsel, whom I recall we paid for at his request. But Dante's team had a surprise. They weren't just arguing coercion. They were arguing fraud. My client, his lawyer announced, was promised a true partnership. Instead, he was systematically excluded from marital assets. Furthermore, and here he produced a stack of documents, we have found evidence of financial impropriety within the Serafina Foundation. Serafina, sitting next to Kincaid, felt the blood drain from her face. What? My client, in his advisory role, discovered a series of irregular transfers, funds moving from the Foundation's general account to a shell corporation, Nautilus Holdings, based in the Cayman Islands. A total of $12 million unaccounted for. Serafina was speechless. She looked at the documents. They were real. Her signature, or a very good forgery, was on the transfers. Mr. Russo was so distressed by this, the lawyer continued, his voice slick with faux sympathy, that he confronted his wife. She told him to mind his own business, fearing for his own legal exposure and heartbroken by this betrayal of the public trust. He felt he had no choice but to leave. It was a brilliant move. Dante wasn't just a victim of a cold marriage. He was a whistleblower. Serafina was reeling. Arthur, I don't know what this is. I never... Kincaid put a hand on her arm. Be quiet, he whispered. Madeline Hayes, who was conferencing in, spoke for the first time. Her voice was pure ice. You are accusing my daughter of embezzlement. The documents speak for themselves, Dante's lawyer said. My client naturally wants to avoid a public scandal. He is prepared to sign a very comprehensive NDA and let this unfortunate matter go away, in exchange for a fair, revised settlement. Let's say $100 million. It was extortion dressed up as a divorce. Get out, Kincaid said. You have 24 hours. Dante's lawyer smiled. Before we are forced to discuss this with the DA and the New York Times. When they were gone, Serafina broke. Mother, I swear, I never... How is this possible? Madeline was silent. She was looking at the Nautilus Holdings document. She recognized the typeface, the specific formatting of the wire instructions. She had seen it before. Arthur, she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. Cancel my meetings. Get me our forensic team. Get me everything on Dante Russo. Every text, every email, every bar tab. I want to know what brand of toothpaste he used for the last 2 years. She turned to her daughter, whose face was ashen. Serafina, she said. It was not a question. Did you know about this? Serafina hesitated. She looked at the floor. I saw an email from our bank in Zurich about a Nautilus account a few months ago. I asked Dante about it. He said it was a discreet account for a new high-risk, high-reward donation. He said he was handling it to surprise me with the returns. He had me sign some papers. He said they were just standard tax forms. The naivety of it hung in the air, thick and poisonous. She had been so desperate for him to be a partner. She had walked right into his trap. Madeline closed her eyes. She had built an empire by anticipating every move, every threat. And the most significant threat had been sleeping in her daughter's bed. This is no longer a divorce, Arthur, Madeline said, opening her eyes. This is a war, and he has just given me the justification to use a nuclear weapon. But for now they were trapped. A public trial would decimate the Foundation's reputation, even if they were innocent. The DA would launch an investigation. The scandal would be the only thing anyone remembered. Pay him. Madeline said the words, tasting like acid. Madame Tuchel, Kincaid was shocked. Pay him. The 100 million. Draw it from the legacy trust my father set up, the one I can't touch. Let him have his victory. Let him believe he has won. Mother, no, Serafina cried. Serafina, Madeline said, when you are fighting a monster, you do not wrestle it in the mud. You let it gorge itself on the bait, and you wait for it to wander into the trap. The settlement was signed. Dante Russo was $100 million richer. The media went insane. He had done it. He had cracked the uncrackable Hayes family. Bianca Wells's PR statement was a masterpiece of magnanimity. Mr. Russo is pleased to put this painful chapter behind him. He wishes Ms. Hayes nothing but the best and will be making a significant anonymous donation to a charitable cause. Dante Russo, the whistleblower, the victim, the man of integrity, had won, and he couldn't wait to tell the world. Victory was intoxicating. Dante felt reborn. The $100 million wasn't just money. It was a scorecard. It was validation. He had faced the Hayes dragon in her lair and walked away with a significant portion of the hoard. He woke up in his Soho loft the morning after the settlement wired, and the sunlight hitting the exposed brick felt different. It felt earned. His first call was to Bianca Wells. We did it, mia cara, he said, stretching like a panther. You did it, Dante, she cooed. You played the part beautifully. Now phase 2, the reinvention. Phase 1 was purging. He returned every gift Serafina had ever given him, the Patek Philippe, the vintage Aston Martin, the custom-made suits, in a very public display. A Page 6 photographer just happened to be there as a bonded messenger service loaded boxes outside the Fifth Avenue penthouse. The headline, Dante's Declaration, Russo returns golden handcuffs. He didn't, of course, return the $100 million. Phase 2 was the flaunting. He flew himself and a close circle of new, ridiculously beautiful friends to St. Bart's on a private Gulfstream G650. The models Irina and Katia were draped over him in every photo he posted. The captions were all about freedom, authenticity, and living my truth. He was photographed in Saint-Tropez, driving a newly purchased white McLaren, the license plate a custom Rosso 1. He was at the Monaco Grand Prix, a regular on the yacht of a Russian oligarch. The press fanned by Bianca ate it up. He wasn't just a rich divorcee. He was a mogul in the making. GQ ran a fawning profile. From muse to mogul, Dante Russo steps out of the shadows. The article was a masterpiece of revisionist history. Sitting in the lobby of the Hôtel de Paris, the writer gushed, Dante Russo is the picture of relaxed power. He sips an espresso not a hair out of place. For a long time, he says, his voice a low melodic baritone. I was defined by who I was with. I was an accessory. He leans in a conspiratorial glint in his eye. But an accessory is just a beautiful object. I am a creator. I had to fight for my freedom, and now I'm going to use it to build something that lasts. The article detailed his vision for the Rue SSO brand. It wasn't just a fashion line. It was a philosophy. It was unapologetic luxury. The crown jewel of this new empire was the flagship store. He had secured a 10,000 square foot space in a historic Soho cast-iron building, the one he had coveted for years. The lease alone was astronomical. He's burning through that settlement, Arthur Kincaid noted dryly to Madeline, presenting a weekly report. Let him, Madeline replied, not looking up from a quarterly report on Aura Tech's satellite division. Give a fool enough rope, Arthur. Dante wasn't just burning the settlement. He was leveraging it. He was now a man with $100 million in liquid assets. He was, for the first time, bankable on his own. He walked into a meeting with a high-powered private equity firm, West Third Capital, and pitched his Rue SSO brand. He was electric. He was the brand. He had the looks, the followers, the media narrative, and most importantly, the skin in the game with his own $25 million commitment. West Third Capital, known for its aggressive plays in the luxury market, was impressed. They agreed to a $75 million seed round. Dante was ecstatic. He now had $175 million on paper to build his empire. He hadn't just beaten the Hayes family. He was about to supplant them. He was going to be the new name in New York luxury. He began the build-out of the Soho store, a monument to his own ego. It was all black marble, smoked glass, and polished brass. A giant 4K video wall was installed, intended to play a loop of his lifestyle campaign shot in Milan. He poached the best staff from Tom Ford and Gucci. He planned the launch party. It would be the event of the fashion calendar, a statement of his arrival. The invitations were thick black cards delivered by hand. Vogue was confirmed. The New York Times Styles section was coming. A-list celebrities were promised. Bianca Wells was a whirlwind of activity. This isn't a store opening, Dante, she told him, checking swatches. This is your coronation. By the time this night is over, no one will even remember the name Serafina Hayes. You will be the story. He loved the sound of that. As the date approached, his arrogance swelled to operatic proportions. He started to believe his own PR. He was the creative genius. He was the victim who had bravely escaped. The $12 million he had siphoned from Serafina's foundation, the act that had bought his freedom, was a distant memory, a minor bit of smart accounting. He had framed her, yes, but hadn't she deserved it? She and her mother so cold, so superior. They thought he was stupid. They thought he was just a face. He looked at his own face in the mirror of his new sprawling bathroom, the face that had launched 100 headlines, the face that was now worth 9 figures. You're not just a face, mio Dio, he whispered to his reflection. "You are an empire." He was so busy admiring his reflection that he never saw the shadow in the corner. He was so focused on the party, the cameras and the adulation, that he never once stopped to ask the most important question. Why in all these months had Madeline Hayes said nothing? He mistook her silence for defeat. He mistook her stillness for surrender. He had never been on a safari, had never seen how a lioness hunts. She doesn't chase. She doesn't roar. She waits utterly still for the prey to become so drunk on its own freedom that it wanders right up to her, offering its throat. And Dante Russo was practically skipping toward the kill zone. While Dante Russo was painting the town red, Serafina Hayes was in a self-imposed exile at the family's stark, beautiful compound in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. She had not handled the divorce well. She wasn't just heartbroken. She was humiliated. She had been played not just by a man she loved, but by her own naivety. The Nautilus Holdings fraud, the $12 million he had stolen by tricking her into signing the transfers, was a wound that festered. It wasn't the money. It was the violation. He had used her trust, her work, as a weapon against her. She spent her days on long, punishing hikes, trying to sweat out the shame. She had stopped painting. What was the point? Her whole life had been a forgery. "He's on GQ," she said one evening, her voice flat, holding up her phone to show her mother who had flown in for the night. Madeline glanced at the cover, Dante, in a velvet blazer, smirking. "It's a magazine, Serafina. It's designed to be thrown away." "He's winning, Mother. He's being celebrated for destroying me. And you paid him." The accusation hung in the crisp mountain air. "Yes," Madeline said, sipping her tea. "I did. Why didn't you fight? You're Madeline Hayes. You don't lose. You don't settle." "The foundation was at risk," Madeline said, using the same logical tone. "A public fight would have jeopardized its charter." "The DA. I don't care about the DA." Serafina exploded, the first spark of her old fire returning. "I care that the man who stole from us, who framed me, is being called a mogul. He's using our money, my money, to build a temple to himself." Madeline regarded her daughter. The pale, quiet girl was gone. In her place was an angry, wounded woman. Good, Madeline thought. Anger is a motivator. Grief is a boat anchor. "You think I paid him," Madeline said, "and that was the end of it. Wasn't it? Serafina, you run a global foundation. What is the first rule of crisis management?" Serafina sighed. "Control the narrative." "No," Madeline said. "That's PR. That's what Bianca Wells does. What is the first rule of power?" Serafina was silent. "You never, ever fight a war on your enemy's terms. You never fight on their terrain, and you never fight when they choose. You let them build their monument. You let them announce their victory, and you wait for them to overextend." Madeline walked to the window, looking out at the Tetons, sharp and unforgiving in the twilight. "He thinks I'm an old woman grieving her daughter's broken marriage. He thinks I'm a CEO, too busy with Auratech to bother with a small-time con man. He has forgotten who I am." She turned back to her daughter. "The $100 million from the Legacy Trust. It was bait. I wanted him to have it. I wanted him to be rich, arrogant, and most importantly, distracted." "Distracted from what?" "From me," Madeline said simply. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a file. "Arthur Kincaid has been busy. While Mr. Russo has been posing for magazines, we have been digging." She laid out a series of key corporate structures. "Nautilus Holdings, the company he used to frame you. He was clever. He routed the money through 3 different jurisdictions: Cayman, then Cyprus, then to a bank in Zurich. "We know this," Serafina said, impatient. "It's a dead end. The account is empty. He used it all as his money to get the West Third deal." "He thought it was a dead end," Madeleine corrected. "But he made a mistake. He got sloppy. He used the same incorporation lawyer in Zurich to set up Nautilus that he had used 3 years ago for... What was it?" She consulted a paper. "Ah, yes, a shell company called Apex Global. All it ever did was receive 1 wire transfer for $50 an email from an Apex Global account. The recipient, Bianca Wells. The subject line, Phase 1, complete. The date 3 days before the Nautilus transfers began." Serafina's breath hitched. "What is this?" "This," Madeleine said, "is where the hunt really begins. He didn't just wake up one day and decide to frame you. This was a plan, a conspiracy. Apex Global was his war chest. And he and Bianca Wells planned the entire divorce, including the whistleblower narrative, months before he ever stormed out of our dining room." "But how did you find this?" "Dante is a creature of habit. He thinks he's a wolf, but he's just a fox. He always goes back to the same hole, the Zurich lawyer. We didn't just investigate Dante. We investigated everyone he ever spoke to. Bianca Wells, his new investors." Madeleine smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator that has just smelled blood in the air. "And who?" Serafina asked, her voice a whisper. "Our West Third capital." "Ah," Madeleine said. "That is the most interesting part. They're a PE firm, very aggressive, very new, and according to their SEC filing, their primary limited partner, the source of 90% of their operating capital, is a holding company based in Luxembourg. And the name of that holding company," Madeleine said, tapping the final document, "is Patagonia Equity. I've never heard of them." "You have," Madeleine said. "It's the private experimental investment arm of Auratech Global. It's my company." Serafina stared, comprehension dawning like a cold, bright sunrise. "You..." "Dante Russo didn't walk into a meeting with West Third Capital," Madeleine explained. "He walked into a trap I had been setting for 6 months. I own his investors. I own his seed money. I own him." "But the 75 million, you gave it to him. He's paying for his own launch party, Serafina. He's using my money to build his store, my money to hire his PR girl, my money to buy his stupid McLaren. Every receipt he signs, every check he cuts, is just another nail in his own coffin." Serafina sank into a chair. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was total. "He thinks he's a mogul," Madeleine continued, "but he's just a middle manager in a company of 1, and I am the CEO, the launch party. That's his performance review, and I'm afraid he's not going to get a good one." What happens now?" "Now?" Madeleine snapped her briefcase shut. "You get on a plane. You're going to Peru. That water treatment facility you were building, the one he tried to sabotage, it's opening. I want you at the ribbon cutting. I want you to be photographed doing your work. Be the woman he tried to erase. And you." "I," said Madeleine Hayes, "am going to New York. I have a statement to prepare." The long, cold silence was over. The hunt had ended. The execution was about to begin. The night of the Rue Esso flagship launch was electric. A cold November rain lashed the streets of Soho, but inside it was a different climate. The 10,000 square foot space was packed a sweltering, humid jungle of perfume, champagne, and ambition. The black marble floors gleamed. The smoked glass walls reflected the pulsing lights. And the giant 4K video wall behind the main stage played a hypnotic loop of Dante himself. Dante on a speedboat, Dante in a bespoke suit, Dante laughing with a beautiful woman, all intercut with the stylized R logo. Bianca Wells, in a silver-sequined gown, stood near the door, air-kissing Vogue editors and whispering in the ears of Times columnists. "Isn't it divine?" she trilled. "He built this all himself, from nothing, a true visionary." The champagne was Bollinger, not the pedestrian verve he once drank. The hors d'oeuvres were passed by models, not waiters. Every detail was designed to scream unapologetic luxury. And at the center of it all was Dante. He was magnificent. He wore a custom white Tom Ford suit, a stark, angelic contrast to the store's dark palace aesthetic. He hadn't just arrived, he had descended. He moved through the crowd, a god among mortals. Every camera flash was a prayer. Every fawning compliment was a hymn. He saw Irina and Katya, the models from St. Bart's, and blew them a kiss. He saw the CEO of West Third Capital, a man named Mr. Peterson, who was in reality a high-level employee of Aura Tech's financial division, and clapped him on the shoulder. "We did it. Peterson," Dante boomed over the music. "The new kings of New York, all you Mr. Russo." Peterson smiled a perfectly neutral corporate smile. At 9:00 p.m., Bianca Wells tapped a microphone. The music dimmed. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man you've all been waiting for, the creative force, the visionary, the mogul, Dante Russo." The crowd erupted. Dante strode onto the low stage, taking the microphone. He was bathed in a single, brilliant, white spotlight. He looked out at the sea of faces at the cameras, at the entire world that was here to worship him. He felt a surge of power, so pure, so absolute, that he almost laughed. He had won. He had won. Wow. He breathed into the mic, a perfect imitation of humility. He waited for the applause to die down. "Thank you. Thank you so much. What a night." He paused, looking up, as if gathering his thoughts. This was the speech he had been rehearsing in his head for 6 months. "They said I was just a face." He began his voice, a low, velvety purr. "They said I was just a kept man, a decoration." A sympathetic awe rippled through the front row. "They said I didn't have a thought in my head, that I didn't have a voice. They tried to put me in a gilded cage." He shook his head, a small, sad smile playing on his perfect lips. "But a cage, even a gilded one, is still a cage. But look around," he said, his voice rising, gesturing to the opulent store. "This is my empire. This is my vision. This was built on my back. With my integrity." He was high on his own supply, feeding off the energy, the flashes, the pure, uncut adoration. "No one can take this from me," he declared, his voice ringing with triumph. "Tonight we celebrate not just a brand. We celebrate freedom. We celebrate authenticity. We celebrate me." He raised his hand, gesturing for his glass of champagne, ready for the toast. "So I say, to Russo." And as he said the name, as the word Russo left his lips, the giant 4K screens behind him, the ones playing his own beautiful face, flickered. The audio in the room cut. The pulsing music, the chatter, all of it gone. A high-pitched feedback whine screeched for a single agonizing second. Dante flinched, annoyed. A technical glitch on his night. "Paolo!" He snapped into the darkness at his tech guy. The screens went black. The store was plunged into a disorienting spotlight and shadow silence. The crowd murmured confused. And then the screens lit up again. But it wasn't Dante's face. It was Madeline Hayes. She was not in a studio. She was in her office at Aura Tech, the one with the panoramic view of the city. She wore a simple navy blue dress. No jewelry, save for a small practical watch. She looked directly into the camera, not with anger, but with the profound, tired disinterest of a CEO about to liquidate a failed asset. Dante froze. His hand holding the microphone hung limply at his side. This was not a live feed. It was a pre-produced statement released simultaneously as phones in the audience began to buzz to Bloomberg, Reuters, The Wall Street Journal, and every major news network on Earth. "Good evening." Madeline's voice filled the store, clinically clear and cold. "For those of you attending the launch of the Rue SSO brand I offer a correction." The crowd was utterly silent. Bianca Wells was staring, her face a mask of horror. "Mr. Russo speaks of his vision, his empire. Let's clarify its origins." Dante's heart began a low, painful drumbeat against his ribs. This wasn't possible. She wouldn't. "The victory? First," Madeline continued, "the $100 million settlement Mr. Russo boasts of. He has painted this as a victory over my family, a testament to his negotiating skill. The truth is simpler." On the screen, a document appeared, a wire transfer confirmation from a legacy trust. This was a disbursement from a trust my late father established, a trust which by its own bylaws I am legally barred from contesting. It was not a settlement. It was a scheduled distribution. It was in essence an expensive but necessary pest removal fee. A collective gasp. Dante felt the blood drain from his face. Pest. The whistleblower. Second. Madeline said, the narrative of Mr. Russo as a whistleblower. The claim that he left his wife upon discovering financial impropriety in her philanthropic foundation. A new document appeared, a bank record from Nautilus Holdings. This is the shell company Mr. Russo discovered. He was right to be alarmed. It was being used for fraud, because he was the one committing it. A timeline flashed on screen. January 10th. Dante Russo meets with Bianca Wells. Apex Global account is activated. January 14th. Bianca Wells receives a $54,000 consulting wire from Apex. February 1 to 5th. Dante Russo presents routine tax forms to his wife. February 7th. The first of 3 illegal wire transfers totaling $12 million is moved from the Serafina Foundation to Nautilus Holdings using the signatures he fraudulently obtained. March 20th. Dante discovers the fraud and demands a divorce. He did not leave because of the fraud, Madeline stated, her voice slicing through the air. The fraud was the pretext for his leaving. It was a meticulously planned 6-month campaign of embezzlement and character assassination, designed for a single purpose: to extort a 9-figure settlement. Dante was no longer breathing. He was a statue carved from ice. "He's lying," a woman shouted from the crowd. It was Bianca Wells, her PR instincts on autopilot. "This is slander. This is the empire." Third, Madeline Hayes continued, as if Bianca hadn't spoken. "The Rue SSO brand itself. Mr. Russo has claimed he built this from nothing. A new set of logos appeared on the screen. West Third Capital, Patagonia Equity. Mr. Russo secured $75 million in seed capital from an investment firm called West Third Capital, a firm, he was told, whose primary limited partner was Patagonia Equity. Madeleine leaned forward slightly. This was the killing blow. Patagonia Equity is a wholly owned subsidiary of Aura Tech Global. It is my personal holding company. Mr. Russo, Dante has not been building his empire for the last 6 months. He has been building mine. Dante's knees buckled. He grabbed the microphone stand to steady himself. No. Peterson. Peterson. He looked wildly for the investor, but Peterson was already gone. I have been for the last 180 days the sole investor, primary creditor, and silent owner of Russo. I funded his store. I paid for his models. I own the lease on this building. I even, through a third party, paid for the very champagne you are drinking tonight. A man in the front row looked at his glass of Bollinger and set it down on a tray as if it were poison. The execution. Mr. Russo made a single critical error, Madeleine concluded. He believed that because my daughter was kind, she was weak, and that because I was silent, I was absent. The image on screen changed. It was no longer Madeleine. It was the granite steps of the New York County District Attorney's office. As of 9:00 p.m. Eastern, Madeleine's voiceover continued. A full criminal complaint with all accompanying evidence has been filed with the DA's office for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Furthermore, the prenuptial agreement which Mr. Russo thought he had invalidated contains a standard morality clause, but it also contains a fraud clause. Any act of fraud committed against Ms. Hayes or her interests voids all settlement payments present and future. The $100 million settlement was gone. And finally, she said, as the sole owner of Russo, I am effective immediately dissolving the brand, terminating all associated employment, and voiding the lease on this property. The company is bankrupt. The empire is closed. Madeleine's face reappeared. She looked for the first time directly at Dante, as if she could see him through the lens. Enjoy the party, Dante, she said. It's the last one you'll ever have that you didn't steal. The screens went black. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the $20 million store was the hiss of the air conditioning. Dante Russo stood on the stage, a ghost in a white suit. The spotlight was still on him, but it no longer illuminated. It interrogated. Then the first phone. A New York Times push alert. Breaking: Madeleine Hayes dissolves Russo. Brand accuses founder Dante Russo of multi-million-dollar fraud. Every head in the room bent down, their faces lit by the blue glow of their screens. They read. They looked up at Dante. They read again. There was no anger, no shouting, just the cold, final judgment of the elite. He was no longer a mogul. He was no longer a man. He was a story. A bad one. Bianca Wells was the first to move. She didn't run. She gathered her clutch, smoothed her dress, and walked calmly toward the exit, already dictating a text to her lawyer. The Vogue editor followed. Then the Times columnist. Then the celebrities, their security details parting the crowd. Within 3 minutes, the coronation had become a crime scene. Dante was left alone on the stage. The models who had been passing hors d'oeuvres had vanished, their trays abandoned. The only people left were a few bewildered tech guys and a Page 6 photographer who was snapping pictures with a rabid intensity. Click, Flash, click, flash. The flashes caught the single tear that rolled down Dante's cheek, a perfect crystalline drop of despair. It caught the moment he finally completely understood. He hadn't been defeated. He had been allowed. His victory wasn't a victory. It was a leash. And Madeline Hayes had just in front of the entire world given it a final neck-snapping yank. He looked at the R logo above the bar. It flickered, and then one by one the lights that formed the letters went out, plunging the store and his life into a total unrecoverable darkness. The aftermath was not a fire. It was a glacier, slow, silent, and absolute. Dante did not walk out of the Soho store. He was escorted. By 10:00 p.m., 2 stone-faced detectives from the DA's white-collar crime unit were waiting for him by the service exit. The Page 6 photographer got the money shot. Dante Russo, his perfect white Tom Ford suit, now splattered with rain, his hands cuffed behind his back, being guided into the back of an unmarked police car. The headline the next morning was simple: shattered. The legal case was a formality. The evidence Madeline had provided was so comprehensive, so meticulously documented, that Dante's lawyers, the same ones who had celebrated the $100 million settlement, advised him to take a plea. The Apex Global emails to Bianca Wells proved conspiracy and intent. The Nautilus wire transfers, cross-referenced with the forms Serafina had signed, proved the fraud. Bianca Wells, in a stunning act of self-preservation, turned state's evidence. She gave the DA everything: voicemails, texts, her own war room notes, in exchange for immunity. Her career in PR was over, but she would not go to jail. Dante had no such protection. He was charged with 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy, and 1 count of aggravated embezzlement. He pled guilty to all charges. His sentencing was 6 months later. The courtroom was quiet. He wore an off-the-rack suit that hung on his now thin frame. The charisma was gone. The magic was gone. He was just a tired, hollowed-out man. The judge was not kind. "Mr. Russo, you conducted a campaign of calculated cruelty, financial and emotional, against a person whose only crime was to trust you. You disguised theft as romance. This was not a crime of passion. This was a business plan. You are sentenced to 7 to 10 years in a state correctional facility." Dante didn't even flinch. He was already gone. The $100 million pest removal fee was of course clawed back by the state, as were the proceeds from the sale of his McLaren and the Soho loft. He was left with nothing. Less than nothing. He was left with a debt to society he could only pay with time. The Rosso store was liquidated. The black marble was ripped out, the 4K screens sold for scrap. A trendy athleisure brand took over the lease 6 months later. And Serafina. She was not in the courtroom. She was not in New York. On the night of the launch party, she had been as her mother instructed in Peru. She was standing on a different kind of stage, a simple wooden platform in a small, dusty village. She was cutting a blue ribbon, officially opening the Luz del Agua treatment facility. The photos that went out on the wire were a stunning contrast to Dante's. There were no celebrities, no champagne, just Serafina, her hair in a practical braid, smiling a real, genuine smile as a small child drank the first cup of clean, safe water from the new tap. When the news of Dante's arrest broke, her phone lit up. She turned it off. She spent the next 3 days hiking in the Andes, visiting other potential sites, doing the work. When she returned, she did not move back into the Fifth Avenue penthouse. She moved into a modest, by Hayes standards, apartment downtown. She took over the Serafina Foundation not just as its benefactor, but as its CEO. Her first act was a complete audit. Her second was to install a new board. Her third was to have a very quiet, very firm lunch with her mother. "I am grateful," Serafina told Madeline, "for what you did. You protected me. You protected the family." "It was," Madeline said, "a necessary business decision." "It was," Serafina countered, "a maternal act of war, and I love you for it. But it ends now." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "Oratech will no longer have a seat on my board," Serafina said. "And your CFO will no longer be co-signing my accounts. The foundation is mine, the work is mine, and my mistakes will be mine." Madeline Hayes looked at her daughter. The wallflower was gone. The mouse was gone. Sitting across from her was a woman who had been forged in a crucible of betrayal and had come out steel. "I respect that," Madeline said, and for the first time she wasn't speaking as a mother to a child or a CEO to an heir. She was speaking as an equal. Serafina Hayes became a force. She leveraged her name not as a brand, but as a weapon for good. She became one of the most effective no-nonsense philanthropists of her generation. She never spoke of Dante. She never had to. Her life was the only statement that mattered. Dante Russo became a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Where are they now article waiting to be written. He was a face, and then he was a name, and then he was just nothing. A failed asset, liquidated and forgotten, while the empire he tried to con, the empire he tried to ruin, just kept on stronger than ever. The story of Dante Russo is a brutal reminder that a public victory is not the same as a private win. He had all the flash, all the charisma, and all the headlines. He won the media war, but he lost the real one. He forgot that in the world of real power, the loudest person in the room is almost always the weakest. He thought he was playing chess, but Madeline Hayes was playing an entirely different game, one where she owned the board, all the pieces, and the clock. He flaunted his $100 million prize, not realizing it was just bait in a trap that had been set long before he even knew he was prey. It's a chilling real-life drama about the difference between image and power, between noise and strategy. What do you think? Was Madeline's revenge a masterstroke of justice or a cold-blooded corporate execution? If you were gripped by this story of ambition, betrayal, and ultimate takedown, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a story where the mighty don't just fall, they're pushed. Be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell because I have so many more stories like this to share. Thank you for watching.